Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Sky Now Basketball Podcast. I am your host, Josh Amick, with my co-host, as always, John Allen. We've reached March Madness, so we got a lot of bracketology to break down for you. We're going to do our best to give you our attempts of what we think will happen, but that's the reason why it's called March Madness, right? We don't really know what's going to happen. We're going to do our best to predict it. We got 4 different teams to talk about as far as Big Sky goes before we get into the larger brackets. So we're going to kick it off on the men's side of things. The Grizz, number 14 seed in the conference, probably right around where we kind of thought, 14, 15. We're kind of thinking either one of those. They got a tough draw, though. They got the number 3 team in Wisconsin. So what are your thoughts on this matchup on the men's side of the bracket, John? What do you think is going to happen with the Grizz going up against the Badgers?
Well, I think if you got to look and break it down in any way, I think Montana's going to be very happy with this. I think that they probably got the best matchup that they possibly could have gotten as a 14 seed, and they're right on that edge too. They released the full seed lines. Montana was the final 14 seed, and then Robert Morris was the first 15 seed, so it could have flipped either way. So they could have ended up as on the 15 line as well. But getting the 14 seed, they get to go to Denver, which it's a single flight away. There's no connections. You can just hop on a flight and you're in Denver if you can make it down there as a Grizz fan. They got the Thursday early game, and I feel like that's important just because Wisconsin's coming off of 4 games in 4 days in the Big Ten tournament. They suffered a loss there. They suffered a loss there to Michigan at the very end. Yep. But that's a lot on the legs.
The semifinals was a tough game too.
Exactly.
So, a lot of close games.
And that's only 3 days rest now on your legs, and now you got to go fly to altitude in Denver.
Yep.
And play that early game. So I feel like that's good for Montana as well. And then if you just look at it, Wisconsin. With Montana, the biggest issue that this team has is their size and being able to grab rebounds on the defensive end. Wisconsin's not a good offensive rebounding team. They're number 282 in the country at that. So, that's an area where it's a really good matchup for Montana, as they may not, give up as much. The size might not be there, but they're going to be able to get boards a little better, you'd think.
Yeah, no, I think it's a tough matchup on paper just because I've told you this off camera before. I'm a big fan of John Tanji from Wisconsin. He's a great shooter. I think he does have what it takes to be an NBA caliber player. But then when I look at Wisconsin and what they do well, it's very similar to what the Grizz do well. They got a lot of good guard play. They don't have a lot of bigs that dominate the game. You mentioned the offensive rebounding part. As simple-minded as this sounds, I think it really is going to come down to is who makes baskets. Both of these teams are pretty good three-point shooting teams, especially Wisconsin. They can get hot from beyond the arc, and if they do, that'll be tough for the Grizz to overcome. But all those other factors that you mentioned, the travel, the amount of games, I always get a little bit weary when a team has a long break. It's you either come out really hot and refreshed, or you come out a little stagnant and stale. And then usually the second half is when that rested team kind of turns things up. So I'm curious to see if that plays a factor. But I do think as far as the bidding goes and the seeding goes, you're pretty happy with this result.
Yeah, right? Definitely. You mentioned Tanji, just named second-team All-American today. So,
there you go.
He's got the accolades now to back up the
Giving
play.
you the hot, fresh news, folks.
And like you said, it's just going to come down to who makes baskets. That's the game of basketball too. I mean,
that's why I said it's really simple-minded, but it's just the way these guys get their baskets. It's not the old school throw it in the post, let a guy do work. It's moving the ball, getting open looks, letting your guards do all the work. But that's the case for both teams. So we'll see what happens. I can't wait for that Thursday matchup, 11:30 time, right?
11:30 Mountain Time.
Yep. So that's going to be a good one. We're going to switch over now to the women's side of the brackets. The Bobcats, they got the 13 seed, so pretty good seeding for them. Unfortunately, they got the number 4 Ohio State Buckeyes. There's going to be a lot of challenges facing this team. I think the Buckeyes have 7 losses on the season, may even be 6. Right now, I saw the ESPN has the Bobcats as 14.5-point underdogs. I'll get into a little bit of my thoughts, but I want to kick it over to you. What do you think is going to be some of the biggest challenges for this Bobcats team going against that Buckeyes team?
I think we talked about the Bobcats defense all year and how well they are. I think that's going to be what decides this game is if the Bobcats can come out there and shut down Ohio State. They're averaging almost 80 points a game, so it's very difficult to, they've put up 100 on multiple occasions this year. You mentioned the kind of their wins and losses. If you break it down, they're 15-0 at home.
Yeah.
And the
Not at
women's
home no
tournament
more.
is at
Yeah.
site, so
Yeah.
Ohio State is hosting this game. So
Oh,
Montana State will have a delegation. I believe they sold
Okay.
out their tickets that they get for their section.
the Bobcats did?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Ohio State is 15-0 at home this year. But then if you look into it as well, there's only one ranked opponent in that, and that was back in December, back at the beginning of conference play when Illinois came in, and they were number 21. So they had a very favorable home schedule. Take it as you will either way, but I mean, it's always going to be difficult when you're a 13 seed going to a Big Ten school, number 4 seed. Then you have to make it a true road game and everything like that. But again, I think just the biggest issue with this game is going to come down to, will Montana State's defense travel, like we've mentioned all season, and will Ohio State's offense be able to feed off of that home energy?
Yeah, I think this is just, in my opinion, just what the committee does such a good job of, because I don't want to sound like I'm saying the same points, but when I look at Ohio State's roster, it's very similar to the make of Montana State, where it's a lot of players contributing. Ohio State has 4 different players that score in double figures. They get a lot of it from smaller guards and forward play. I do want to talk about the matchup. Sharik, the defensive player, she was the defensive player of the year for Big Sky, the true freshman. She's probably going to be matched up with Jelani Cambridge, their guard. She's a really good guard, averages 15.4 points a game. I'm really curious to see how that matchup goes, because I've talked about it all year, how I think guard play really matters when it comes down to these games. I think if she alone can kind of take Cambridge out of her game, and then it comes down to their guard forward, Cody McMahon, she's going to be probably tasked with, getting guarded by Dykstra. And I like that matchup. I think Dykstra has a size advantage on her, so that could bode really well for the Bobcats. But I think it comes down to the guard play, and I don't want to be Big Sky bias here, but I think 14.5 points is too much. I'm not saying they necessarily get the win, but I think the way this Bobcats team has competed, defense travels, all those things that we've talked about, I think the same thing's going to happen here. Buckeyes is a tough matchup. A great point with them being at home as well. But I think the Bobcats team will feel a little disrespected or slighted by this, and I think they'll come out ready. You got any final thoughts on this one?
I mean, the disrespect and the slighted feeling, I think that I would agree with that. We've talked about it as well in our previous podcast. This Montana State team, I feel like, is worthy of at least a 12 seed. Mm-hmm. So getting a 13 seed is very difficult. If you look at some of the teams that were very similar in the way that they played, you can go one way with Grand Canyon, who's also right there on the 13-14 line.
Yep.
But then you could also go with FGCU, Florida Gulf Coast. They got up to a 12 seed. South Dakota State, who has the mutual opponent with Montana, they only beat Montana by 8 when they met in December. They got a 10 seed. So, I mean, I feel like Montana State is right about on that same level as the Jackrabbits, and that kind of just feels like they kind of didn't get that respect. Maybe it's because South Dakota State's kind of proven themselves year after year in the Summit League. Kind of like how Wisconsin Green Bay has in women's basketball. They got themselves a 12 seed, but they've always been up there, 30-1, 32-1, stuff like that. Just great seasons, and have established that kind of name recognition. And I feel like maybe sometimes that doesn't, with a team like Montana State right now, who's just had an incredible year, maybe that name recognition just isn't there, and that's kind of what slighted them. So I feel like that's also going to play a pretty big factor into this. You mentioned the difference, the 14.5 point difference on the line. I do think I'd agree with you on that's a little bit too much, especially with how Montana State's defense can play. You can keep a game lower scoring. That's always going to make it tighter. So
yeah, the Bobcats getting back to the tourney for the first time since 2002. Not to bring up bad news, but last time they did that, they had a number 1 seed draw against Stanford, and they got destroyed. But 2022. Sorry. It wasn't 2022. It was just a couple years ago. Yeah. And that was the other point I was going to make, is 3 players on that Bobcats team are still on this team. I think that's going to bode well for them. They have that experience, and they also added the best player on their team, Esmeralda Morales, who wasn't on the team for that experience. She's now their best player. A lot of positive things for the Bobcats.
Certainly hope that the Bobcats don't come out and have the same start that they had against Stanford.
Got outscored 20-0 first
20-0, and that first quarter was not a good start. Get points on the board, and they've got to hang in there early and weather the storm. So
we're going to move on now to the other couple of Big Sky teams that are not in the big tournament, but they still get some bids as well. We're going to kick it off with Northern Colorado. They are in the NIT. They play UC Irvine. I hate that draw for them. Irvine is very balanced. They got multiple players scoring 10+ a games. My main concern here in this matchup is the Bears. They're a very balanced team too, but UC Irvine's Bent Lukton. Are they going to have an answer for him? That big down low, he averages almost a double-double. We've watched their games in tough matchups with UC San Diego. This team, I feel like, should have probably been in the tournament, found a way in there, maybe a first round in, but instead they're now in the NIT playing Northern Colorado. How do you think the Bears are going to line up in this matchup?
Yeah, I think that this is going to be a good matchup if the Bears can come out and play like they did towards the end of that Big Sky Conference schedule and that tournament. Offensively, they had 3-4 weapons throughout the tournament that were knocking down shots. Jaron Riley in the championship game kept them in there. You have Isaiah Hawthorne who can get hot at any time.
One of my favorites.
Langston Reynolds also out there who can get hot at any point. So they've got the talent that can compete with it. It's just whether or not they're going to come out and shoot the ball well. On the other hand, you've got UC Irvine, and like you mentioned, they kind of have that slight feeling because they really feel like they should have been in at least the talking for an at-large bid.
Yeah.
I think I saw Joe Lenardi of ESPN had them in the next 4 out, so pretty close. And losing to UC San Diego in that Big West championship game would also be a difficult, pill to swallow for them. When you get that situation, though, it's really interesting to see how a team will rebound to it. Are they going to take that slight and just kind of give up on their season because, you're out of the regular season, you can't go to the NCAA tournament now?
Yeah.
Or are they going to take that slight and go out there and try to win a trophy?
Yeah.
And it's all about which Irvine team is going to come out. I feel like a lot of times with mid-majors, they do try to go out there and want that trophy. Having to go to Irvine is also a thing with that you're going to have to look into. And boys, or the Bears having to play a true road game for that, I think it's just going to be very difficult. But I would not count the Bears out, is what I will say.
Yeah, no, you took one of the points away from me that I was going to mention is that it's always tough when a team they believe that they not only should have won their conference, but they should have at least got an at-large bid. None of that happens. Now, how motivated are you going to be in the NIT? I think the one thing that does help with that is, like you just mentioned, they will be at home. You'll get that people backing you. They'll be willing you to do better. And for the last time, no matter what happened prior to this game, it's still a lot of seniors last time on the court or the last time wearing that uniform. So I still think they'll find that motivation that they need. I would not be surprised if Irvine makes a deep run in the NIT just because of them feeling slighted. But Northern Colorado was a team that has been balanced all year. And I'm curious to see how this matchup works out. I think that their big will be the biggest difference because a guy we talked about it with the other matchups about how these guards kind of dictate the game. This guy dictates the game for UC Irvine. So are the Bears going to be able to have an answer for him? If they not, and he puts up 25 and 10, it won't be a close game. But UC Irvine, it doesn't mean they're perfect. I think the balance of the Bears can really play a factor here.
And with that, too, there's always the idea of the tactic, how UConn played the national championship game last year with Purdue and Zach Edey.
Yeah.
You have that 7-foot forward.
Yeah.
No, they let him.
Oh, yeah, he scored 40, right?
Yeah, they let him have his. Yeah. He can get whatever he wants, but we're going to make sure that you can't shoot the three, that you are only going to him, and that we try to limit him when we can.
Yeah.
So there's always that aspect of it, too. Let the big man kind of work his way inside and have what they want, but deny the passes, deny everything. If they get it to him, fine, he beats us, but we're not going to let you, the four on the outside, beat us.
Yeah. No, I believe in that all started back in the day with Steve Nash when he was winning his MVPs. We're like, there's not going to let you have to score 30 because we're not going to let you get 15 assists. So that's a very good point, too. They could just let him do his thing like Edey did last year. Moving on to the WBIT, which is a term I'm getting familiar with. I'd never heard of that before. No offense to the women's side. I just didn't know they had that many different brackets. I was always familiar with the major bracket and then the NIT. But this is a new bracket for us. And then we got NAU facing a very familiar foe in Arizona. What are you expecting in this matchup?
Yeah, well, we talked about it earlier off the podcast that these two teams met earlier in the year.
Back in November.
I believe you said that NAU ended up getting the victory.
Yeah, I was 92 to 75, I think it was.
So, I mean, it's always a good sign when you can go out and beat a power conference opponent like Arizona from the Big 12. But, a rematch is never going to be the same.
No, exactly.
I feel like the Lumberjacks, they're going to build off of that game that they played earlier. They have the film now of what they did correctly. They can work on that continuously and go into this game, and it's going to be on the road. And I know also that's another thing where they beat them head to head. They have the better record, but Arizona gets the 2 seed while Northern Arizona is unseeded. It's kind of weird, but I guess in a lot of these tournaments it could kind of be money based.
Yeah.
You're paying for host privileges. I know it's that way on the men's side when you get to like the CIT and stuff like that. Some of those lower down tournaments that are a lot of mid majors. So, but yeah, I think that this is probably a good matchup for them based on the fact that they're familiar. They know that what they need to do to beat them. They've done it already this year, and just work on that again and maybe watch some film and see what's changed maybe for the Wildcats. But I do like this matchup for Northern Arizona.
Yeah, I think with what happened with Northern Arizona getting upset by the Lady Grizz and then getting a draw with a team that they're familiar with, yes, they have to travel, but they're traveling in the same state. They can hop on a bus. It's not that far away from each other. And you have that familiarity and that confidence that you already beat this team by 17 earlier in the season. I am curious to see the matchup between, we all know about Sophie Glancy, but Arizona has a very good forward as well. Brea Cunningham, she averages 10 and 7. I think it can kind of come down to them. But in that last game, what it came down to was the best player on the court for NAU was Nia Morin. She got hot from 3. She scored 22 in that game. Arizona has another good guard too, Jada Williams. But I do think that if NAU gets the performance that Morin had a really good game in that game against the Lady Grizz too. She got hot from 3. And they can get that and then get the normal performance from Glancy. I think NAU wins this one. I think the fact that they weren't seeded, they're looking at it as like, we beat this team by 17 already, and you think that they're on the same level as us. I think it'll be different from UC Irvine where they will come out motivated and want to end things the right way and get to the next round. So any final thoughts on that?
No, I think you've kind of said it perfectly, just wanting to go out there and prove that the first time wasn't a fluke.
Yeah. All right, so folks, we have picks for you this week.
Ooh, let's hold off on the picks really quick. We had some news that came in for the women's side of things that the Lady Grizz finally getting their head coach, and they didn't have to look very hard to get him. They've just took the interim tag off of Nate Harris here for a 3-year deal. So that coming out on Tuesday. He went 7-7 in the regular season, 9-8 with the tournament games after Brian Holsinger's departure. So I wanted to ask you, do you like this hire? Is this the right hire for Montana?
I don't know enough about Montana's history to say it is the right hire. I will say this. When we were watching the Big Sky Women's Conference Tournament and the way the Lady Grizz kept competing and were just 7.9 seconds away from getting a bid into this tournament that we're getting ready to break down, I thought that when a team rallies and you lose your coach, you get this interim coach, and the team didn't quit. They actually ended up playing better than they had all year. I told myself, I think I even said this to you when we were watching that game, when Lady Grizz upset NAU, I was like, Nate Harris just got himself a job. That was how I looked at it. I didn't expect them to do what they did with the Bobcats, too, to follow it up with that great performance, with another great performance. But I thought that the team helped play him into a job. It showed that team rallied behind him. I mean, they had Holsinger there for a long time, and those seniors still trusted Nate Harris, that they put all that trust in them, and we're 7.9 seconds away from us talking about who they might have played. So I think it's a right hire for them, and I think it was, like you said, it was a no-brainer because of how they ended the season. I think if they go into that Big Sky Conference tournament, they lose in the first round, no one would have been shocked by that or surprised by that, but maybe that would have been enough for them to say, let's look at other options. But the fact that the main thing is how do you compete in conference against those rivals, he showed that team can do it. And the way they played out the season, it was very much deserving.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on that too. It's just, I feel like he unlocked something with this team that wasn't there with Holsinger during the first half of the season. And one thing that I noticed when they started playing under Harris in those first few games is it felt like the team was having fun. And I don't know if I could say that they were when Holsinger was the coach. It felt a lot more serious there. I'm not saying that Brian Holsinger is a bad coach because he did good things with this team. He earned that extension beforehand. But, once Harris took over, it felt like he was able to unlock this team's full potential this year. And maybe the record doesn't exactly show it because you do still have to go through the bumps and lumps of a coaching change in the middle of the season. But for him to finish out 7-7, when they weren't exactly in the best position, they ended up as a 6 seed, but then they go out, take out Idaho in the first round, who's the 3 seed. They took out the 2 seed in Northern Arizona, and they were 8 seconds away from taking out the 1 seed. They show that they compete with the 3 top teams in the conference. And so I feel like just that performance alone was worthy of them at least bringing him in for the interviews. And I know Kent Haslam said a couple days ago that he wasn't expecting this to take long, so I feel like they had in their head that Harris, as long as he accepted, was going to be the next head coach. And I do think that I would agree with you that this is a great hire because what he's shown this year.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really tough mid-season to kind of change philosophies and change your leadership and do all that. I do like the fact that you brought up them having more fun because I remember watching that game against NAU. I think they were down by two points, or they might have been up 2 points going to the break, and I watched Nate Harris's interview at halftime, and he was laughing and joking, and he said, oh, we're maybe 1 of 9 from 3 right now, but those numbers are going to flip in the second half, and we'll get hot. And they came out the third quarter. I think they hit 5 threes just in the third quarter. But I just thought it was interesting that, yeah, you had a 2-point lead over the number 2 seed. You probably feel pretty good about that. But you always get these very stern coaches at halftime, like, I got to go back and game plan. And he kind of seemed really relaxed. I think that did something with these women at Montana. So I think that it was the right hire. I think it was. So we shall see. But folks, we're going to break down our bracket, do our best to bracket for you, but we got a special edition that we're going to try to incorporate to all the viewers out there. We are creating this as an open bracket on ESPN that we will provide a link for you guys. So when we are done making our picks, feel free to join that link and make your own picks and compete against us. And if you're doing a lot better job than us so-called experts are, feel free to let us know. But we're going to go ahead and break down the bracket. You want to start with the men's or the women's?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in too and say if you are looking for it, maybe you don't find the link or anything. If you go onto the ESPN Tournament Challenge and search Big Sky Now, that's the name of the group. It's open to the public. 1 entry per person. Yep. Can't make a bunch of brackets. I'm sorry. Yep. We're just doing a single bracket per person. But me and Josh will be in there. Feel free to join us, men's and women's. So make sure to get one in for each side and compete against friends and compete against us.
Yeah, and make sure that you do that by Thursday. That is the deadline because games will start going. There's already play-ins going on tonight. We'll excuse those. We're picking those. We're going to figure out what happens with those play-ins. But we'll give you 4 free ones and then see what happens from there. So let's break down this matchup. Let's just go left side, right side. Have you take it away, and then I'll follow it up with my picks.
Yeah, well, let's you want to start on the women's side
Let's
first?
start on the women's side. Let's give the women some love. We got the higher seed on the women's side.
All right. So let's go ahead and look at those first 4 then first, though, if we're going to break those down a little bit. High Point, William and Mary here on the left side in Austin. I'm going to, a lot of these for me are going to be pick 'em because with some of the mid-major conferences, it's
tough.
It's hard to follow everything when it comes to college basketball. There's just so much around there.
Pick a mascot you like.
But I'm going to go with the Tribe. I've always kind of just been an enjoyer of William and Mary basketball, and it's their first time into the tournament on the men's or the women's side. Okay. So I'll go with William and Mary there. UC San Diego and Southern. UC San Diego's kind of been my my go-to this year with the Tritons on both men's and women's side. Another team making their first appearance on both sides and in their first year of eligibility. As for Columbia and Washington, this one's difficult. I know you're going to be mad at me if I pick Columbia.
It's fine.
The 3-bit Ivy League was a very interesting story this year, and watching that Ivy League final, I do think Columbia will win this game. They hung in there with Harvard pretty well. And then Iowa State and Princeton, I'm going to go ahead and take Princeton in that one as well.
Same reasons. Yep.
Yeah, it's very similar.
Okay.
So we'll move over to that top left quadrant. UCLA, I think that's a given in a 116 matchup.
Yep.
Georgia Tech is who I've got in that 8-9. I'll take the 9 seed. Ole Miss and Baylor I've got going through. I know Baylor was one that we talked about with Montana State potentially having to match up with.
Yeah.
I do like the Bears there. Florida State over George Mason, LSU. I also have Harvard winning in the first round and NC State meeting up there.
Okay.
How do you want me to do this? You want me to keep going into the Final Four off of that quadrant, or
no? Let's go left side, right side, and then I'll go mine.
Okay. Then got USC, Mississippi State, Kansas State, and Kentucky, Iowa, Oklahoma, South Dakota State. I just did SDSU. I got to remember that. South Dakota State and UConn.
Yep.
South Carolina and Indiana, Alabama and Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, Oregon, and Duke. I'm not picking too many upsets. I do like a lot of the favorites in this. the top 3 seeds especially. Texas and Creighton there. Tennessee and Montana State. I'm going to go with Montana
Okay.
State. I'm not going to, shy away from the upset there. I like the Bobcats defense. I've been kind of high on them all season. I do think they're underseeded, and I think Ohio State's a difficult matchup, but I think that they can get it done.
Fair enough.
I also think that that's going to be the biggest upset in the first round. So, and then I've got that Princeton team that I picked in the first 4. I've got them advancing over Michigan into the second round, Notre Dame winning, then Nebraska and TCU.
All right, so not a whole lot different from me. I did have William and Mary, UC San Diego. I did have Washington picking. That is a homer pick. I grew up in Seattle, for those who don't know. So that is, I got to go with the UW right there. I took Iowa State to get them. I think Iowa State was a team that kind of had a disappointing season as far as where they started, and I think that they'll bounce back. Moving on to the left side, I got UCLA, Georgia Tech, Ole Miss, Baylor. I have Florida State. You had Florida State as well?
Yes.
LSU. I have Michigan State in that one. You had Harvard winning that one, right? So that is one thing different. I have NC State in the next round. USC, Mississippi State, Kansas State, Kentucky. I have Murray State beating Iowa.
Okay.
I got Oklahoma beating Florida Gulf Coast. I also had South Dakota to win. I think they'll take down the Cowboys or Cowgirls. I don't know if they changed their name, but I think they will take care of Oklahoma State. UConn, no-brainer. South Carolina, Utah as well. Bama, Maryland.
Oh, you picked Utah. Okay, I had Indiana.
I picked Utah to beat Indiana. That one, I think 8 and 9 picks.
Pick 'em.
Yeah, it's a pick 'em, and I just went with Utah. I just think that division or that conference I think it's just gonna go Utah. I got Bama advancing to play Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina. I have Vanderbilt beating Oregon. This one I was really split on, but I just went with the SEC school because I just feel like they've had better competition this year. I got Duke taking that one, Texas Creighton as well, Tennessee, Ohio State. I got Michigan taking over or beating Iowa State, Notre Dame, and then I have Nebraska and TCU.
Okay. So why Ohio State over Montana State? What are you thinking with that one? How do you think that game's going to
I think it's just a home court thing. I think if I was to predict, it'll be a close game because I believe that much in the Bobcats defense. But I think at the end, it's just going to be it's just a tough draw. And it's not necessarily a tough draw as far as the matchup goes. I think they can compete, but it's just where they're having to go play at. I think that's the biggest thing. And a team like Ohio State, what they have 6 losses all year. I mean, the Bobcats have 3, but.
So how about this then? How about instead of, why you picked Ohio State, because it's easier to pick, the favorite. Mm-hmm. You don't think, though, that 14.5 is the right line. Where would you draw that line? What are you taking? Given Montana State, how many points?
I'm taking the Bobcats +6.
+6?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2-possession game.
Yeah. I think it'll be that close. I really have I've watched the Bobcats for a couple of games throughout the regular season, but I watched them when it mattered the most in the conference tournament. And that game against the Grizz, I think, is going to play a bunch of factors for them, showing that they didn't buckle under pressure because we wouldn't probably be talking about them right now if they did.
All
right. So let's go into now the Sweet 16.
All righty. Well, let's let you go first. Then I started off that last round.
Yeah, I got UCLA advancing. I got Baylor beating Ole Miss. I have LSU advancing over Florida State, and I have NC State taking over Michigan State. USC advancing, Kentucky advancing, Oklahoma advancing, UConn advancing, going over to the right side. South Carolina, I have Maryland beating Alabama on that one. I think that game will be really good. North Carolina beating West Virginia, getting a rematch with Duke again. Duke beating Vandy. Texas advancing over Creighton. Tennessee beating Ohio State. Notre Dame beating Michigan. And then I got TCU beating Nebraska.
All right, a lot of similarities for me as well. UCLA, and then I've got Ole Miss over Baylor in that second round.
That's a good pick.
I'm gonna pick, 5-4. Could be another toss up, kind of like those 8-9s early. But I think that'll be a good game. Mm-hmm. I've got LSU over over FSU, and then I've got NC State also. USC, it's, that doesn't really need that much explaining, I don't think. I've got Kansas State over Kentucky, another 5-4. I also have Oklahoma, and then UConn.
Yep.
South Carolina, Maryland, UNC and Duke as well. They're going to meet up for a third time. They've already split the meeting so far this season. Texas and Tennessee, so another matchup of SEC schools.
Yep.
I also have Notre Dame, and then I've got TCU as well.
Okay. Moving on to Elite Eight. What you got?
All right. UCLA again. I've got LSU over NC State, though.
Okay.
Then I've got USC over Kansas State and UConn over Oklahoma. I'm going to take South Carolina over Maryland and Duke over North Carolina.
Okay.
Duke's been playing a lot better basketball over the end of the season
Yeah.
compared to how the Tar Heels have been playing. I've got Tennessee over Texas. That's my first 1 seed gone.
Okay.
The Vols had a rough end to the season, and for the first time I think ever they were in the, they didn't get a bye in the SEC tournament, but I just, they always get it together come March.
Yeah.
And the Lady Vols are always one of those
Well-coached.
difficult teams to get out. And then I've got Notre Dame, who's another one of those teams of late that's just been really hot in the tournament regardless. And then I completely missed that. Yeah, I've got Notre Dame over TCU. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, Notre Dame over TCU. Yeah. No,
I thought I had another game there, but no.
No. All right. So I have a little bit different heading here into the Elite Eight. I got UCLA taking Baylor. I have NC State beating LSU. I think NC State, how they finished the season in the ACC tournament is probably not what they expected. I think they're a little disappointed. I think that they'll come out ready against LSU. USC, I got them taking Kentucky. I got UConn beating Oklahoma. I think UConn, you can make a case that they're the best team in the country. On the other side, I got South Carolina beating Maryland. I also have Duke taking North Carolina for the same reasons you did. The way that they played in the ACC tournament, winning the ACC tournament, that's going to bode well. It gives me a lot of those Kimball Walker UConn vibes where they weren't a very good seed as far as the Big East tournament goes, and then they get hot and they win the whole thing. I got Texas beating Tennessee for a little bit different reasons than you, because Texas made it to that SEC title game against South Carolina and then got blew out. I think it'll bode well for them, knowing that they wanted the SEC championship. They're going to be a little bit upset, and they're going to come out and get it done. And then I got TCU upset Notre Dame. I think that's going to come down to the guard play against Hidalgo and Van Lith. I'm going with Van Lith on this one.
Okay.
What do you got for the Final Four?
All right, my Final Four. I've got UCLA over LSU. I've got UConn over USC. I've got South Carolina over Duke. Those two played earlier in the season. South Carolina did pick up the win. Duke played pretty well for a half, but South Carolina is just going to be too much for them. Then I've got Notre Dame over Tennessee. I got Notre Dame getting back to the Final Four.
All right. A little bit different here. I got UCLA beating NC State. I have USC beating UConn. This was by far, for me, the toughest matchup I had to pick. I ended up with USC because Juju Watkins is my favorite women's basketball player. And also my sister went to USC. I'm a little bit of a homer pick here, I'm not going to lie. So I have USC winning that one. I have South Carolina beating Duke as well. And I got Texas beating TCU, another rivalry matchup, which I think will be great if it shakes out that way and getting us into the championship now, right?
Into the Final Four.
Oh, Final Four.
Final
Four. Go ahead.
So we've we're picking the Final Four games into the championship.
That's right. Yep.
I've got UCLA over UConn. I don't know. UCLA got it together. Finally beat USC there in the Big Ten championship game.
Yep.
I think they're playing their best basketball. I really do think they're the best team in the country. I would say personally, and I know it's going to kind of contradict what I picked in that Elite Eight matchup, I think there are 3 teams that can win this tournament. I think that UCLA can win it, I think that USC can win it, and I think that South Carolina can win it.
Okay.
Any of those 3 would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
I would be a little shocked if UConn won it, and then going down the list a little bit more shocked as you kind of pick in some of those teams that get eliminated here in the Elite Eight. But those would be my 3 teams that I think are going to win it. So on the other side, I've got South Carolina taking down Notre Dame.
Yep.
And then in the championship game, I've got UCLA beating South Carolina.
Okay. I have a little bit different here, and for this, a lot of the same reasons I just mentioned. I have UCLA facing USC, a matchup they're very familiar with. USC took the first 2 games, then lost the biggest game in that the Big Ten tournament. So I have USC getting redemption, taking UCLA and getting the 3rd win against them this year. South Carolina, Texas, I do think South Carolina is going to win this game, but for the simple fact that I don't want to keep just picking favorites. I got Texas rebounding because of what happened in that tournament game. Anytime you get blown out, you got to come back and fight, and I think Texas will get it done. So yeah, go break us into the championship then. Who you got closing it out?
Yeah, like I said, I got UCLA over South Carolina.
Oh yeah, you did say that. My bad. I got a rematch of the Reggie Bush, Vince Young days. I got USC against Texas, and I'm going with USC for the simple fact that I'm a big believer in Juju Watkins. I think that she can't be guarded, and if it shakes out that way, I think if they end up facing South Carolina, it might be a different story. But if they end up getting that matchup that I think against Texas, I think USC gets it done. All right. Folks, we don't expect you to remember all of these picks. There's a lot going on. So our picks will be part of that open link bracket that we did tell you about. This is just a way for us to kind of give you a little bit more insight on what we're thinking and why we're thinking that way. But we will have this full list available to you so you don't have to memorize that. But with that being said, we're going to do the same thing on the men's side now. So, John, let's talk about the first 4 and what you got.
Alrighty, well, yeah, it's Tuesday night. We're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, so here coming up this evening for us.
So these are fresh picks, folks. we don't know the results already.
Yeah, Alabama State, I think, is going to take down St. Francis.
Yep.
Texas Xavier is such a good game to me. I like Sean Miller as a coach. I think Texas has been playing better basketball of late, so I'm going to go with the Longhorns.
Yep.
American and Mount St. Mary's. American's been playing pretty well in the Patriot League. Mount St. Mary's just kind of made a run and won the MAAC. So I'm going to go ahead and take American in that one. And then San Diego State and North Carolina. I'm going to put my biases aside as a Duke fan, and I'm going to go with North Carolina just because they are playing best basketball they've played all season here at the end of the year. But it would not surprise me if San Diego State did win that. Whether or not I think North Carolina deserved to be in is a whole other story, and that we're not going to talk about.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast we could break down. A lot of controversy with that if you didn't hear about that.
So, but then we'll move into that first round here. Auburn, I think that's a no-brainer. And then Louisville over Creighton. I feel like Louisville got the raw end of the deal when it came to the seeding, getting an 8 seed, especially against Auburn in that second round potentially. UC San Diego, like I said, and the women said, they're the team that I've kind of rallied behind this year. First trip in, I think that they're going to take down Michigan, who, again, Big Ten champions, kind of got the raw end of the deal, getting a 5 seed. When Wisconsin gets a 3 seed, who they just beat. So Texas A&M, I'm thinking they're going to beat Yale. I think that's going to be a really good game. Yale's been playing some good basketball of late, won the Ivy League on Sunday. So I just think that the SEC is really strong this year, and Buzz Williams has Texas A&M in a good spot. Ole Miss over the winner of, I guess North Carolina, because I picked North Carolina tonight. So I've got Ole Miss there. I've got Lipscomb over Iowa State. That, I think, is my upset special of the first round. I think the Bisons get it done. Marquette, New Mexico, I've got New Mexico. I like Richard Pitino. Michigan State, Izzo's never bet against Izzo in March. That's one of my go-tos. So I've got Michigan State there. Florida over Norfolk State. UConn, 2-time defending champions. They're not going to lose in the first round. Colorado State over Memphis. I got that as a 12 over 5. Maryland over Grand Canyon. Could be another close game. Drake over Missouri. Bennett Sturts is playing great basketball. Drake's 30-3. First-year head coach. A bunch of D2 transfers. The Bulldogs, they're a good team. Texas Tech over UNC Wilmington. Kansas over Arkansas. That's going to be a good battle as well. Calipari versus Bill Self.
Bill Self, yeah.
St. John's, they're going to get going in their they're having an immaculate season with Rick Pitino. I think they're going to get it done easily over Omaha. Duke over Mount St. Mary's / American. I picked American in that one. Yep. So Duke, Mississippi State, Oregon over Liberty, Arizona over Akron, BYU. I got Wisconsin over Montana. Sorry to my alma mater. I believe that you guys will keep it close. I don't believe that you'll get the win. I've got Vanderbilt over St. Mary's. I've learned not to trust St. Mary's in recent years in this tournament. Alabama, I've got Houston. I've got Gonzaga. Feel like the Zags are kind of another one of those hidden teams as an 8 seed.
Yeah.
The 8 seeds are really difficult this year, and so yeah, I got the Zags over Georgia, Clemson over McNeese, Purdue over High Point, Illinois, Kentucky, Utah State over UCLA, and then Tennessee.
Okay, I got a little bit of some different variation here. I in the first four, and not too much different. I have Alabama State. I have Texas as well beating Xavier. I do have Mount St. Mary's beating American. And then I have North Carolina beating San Diego State for the same reasons you just mentioned. They played really well in the ACC tourney, and I think because of that, they'll come out. And they've got to hear the noise about no one thinks they deserve it. So I would not be surprised if they knock out a couple of wins. I won't get too crazy, but maybe one or two surprises, and then they'll go on. Moving on the left side of the bracket, no-brainer, Auburn. Then I got Louisville beating Creighton. I think for the same reasons that you kind of mentioned. I talked about this Louisville team off camera before, how I think they've been kind of being flown under the radar all year. They had a good performance in the ACC tourney, and then they get an 8 seed. So I think that might be the best first-round matchup, though, because Creighton has been playing well all year. They had another great performance in the Big East tourney. So I would not be surprised at all if Creighton gets this win, but I am picking Louisville for the simple fact that they got slided. Moving on, I got to take Michigan because they just won the Big Ten tournament, and I was really impressed with their bigs they have. They got Derek Wolf, and then what's the other guy's name?
Vladislav Golden.
Yeah, I think those guys can kind of dictate the game, so I think they get it. A&M, got them advancing. I have Ole Miss beating North Carolina. Iowa State taking Lipscomb, no surprise there, except going against what you thought. I have Marquette beating New Mexico because I've always liked Marquette. I just think that they're very well coached, and they kind of started off the season playing really well. They were a top 10 team for a while, then kind of towards the end kind of had a whimper. So I think they just get things right. Michigan State, same reason. Michigan State, I have no fandom with them at all, but they're one of my favorite teams to watch because of Tom Izzo. He coaches them so well. I love watching them play, especially during March. Florida winning. I got Oklahoma knocking out UConn just because I think the SEC was the best conference in the nation. So I think the way that the competition they've been going against all year, I think that's going to play more of a factor. And I think UConn, they just had a letdown of a season compared to back-to-back national champions, and then now they are an 8 seed. Moving on, I was actually shocked by it, and part of this is maybe because I'm still bitter about a bet I've made, but I got Colorado State beating Memphis. I think Memphis is a good team, but I was really impressed with Colorado State when I got to watch them against Boise State. Clifford is a great player. He's going to make it to the NBA someday. So I got Colorado State in that upset there. Maryland over Grand Canyon. I have Missouri taking Drake, Texas Tech. Arkansas. I have Arkansas beating Kansas. Okay. It's just I guess it's more of I'm a fan of Calipari, and I'm not a fan of Kansas at all. I don't know why I've always hated the Jayhawks, and so I just think that they don't get it done. I don't think they have enough to get it done, and for the same reasons, the SEC was a superior conference this year. Duke advancing, Mississippi State advancing, Oregon, Arizona. I have VCU upsetting BYU. I just think VCU plays a lot of defense, and I think that'll be the biggest factor. Sorry, Montana fans, I have Wisconsin advancing. Vanderbilt over St. Mary's, same thing you had. Alabama, Houston, Gonzaga, Clemson, Purdue. I have Texas upsetting Illinois. I'm rocking with the SEC. Then I got Kentucky advancing. I have Utah State upsetting UCLA, and then I have Tennessee over Wofford.
Nice. A lot of similar ones there down the stretch. We're really high on the SEC. I can't say I'm that high, but they good conference. They got a lot of good teams this year, so it wouldn't surprise me. How about the next round? Who you got in the Sweet 16?
I have Auburn over Louisville, A&M over Michigan. I have Ole Miss upsetting Iowa State in that one. I got Michigan State beating Marquette, Florida beating Oklahoma, Maryland beating Colorado State, Texas Tech beating Missouri, St. John's getting Arkansas. On the right side of things, I have Duke over Mississippi State, Oregon over Arizona, Wisconsin over VCU. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that right?
Wisconsin over VCU?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Bama over Vandy. Houston over Gonzaga. Clemson over Purdue. Kentucky over Texas. And Tennessee over Utah State.
All righty. Well, we have a fair few similar picks, but this top left quadrant is going to be a lot different. I've got Auburn losing to Louisville. Louisville is the 10th ranked team in the nation, and how the AP top 10 looks right now, 1 through 4 in the AP top 10 are 1 seeds. 5 through 8 are 2 seeds. Number 9 is a 3 seed. Number 10 is an 8 seed.
Yeah.
Louisville is the number 10 ranked team in the AP, and they are an 8 seed. I don't know how that's possible. Auburn has lost 3 of their last 4 coming into this tournament. Mm-hmm. Louisville gets to the final of the ACC championship. I think they beat Auburn.
Okay.
I think Chucky Hepburn's playing his best basketball, the Wisconsin transfer. So I think Louisville gets to that Sweet 16. I've got UC San Diego again. I think they make it to the Sweet 16 over Texas A&M.
Okay.
And sets up a 12 versus 8 Sweet 16 matchup. I've got Ole Miss over Lipscomb and Michigan State for reasons that we've all both mentioned. Florida, I think they'd knock out UConn. Florida-UConn, though, is a classic rivalry going back to the Richard Hamilton days. They had some matchups with Shabazz Napier, too, UConn. So that could be another classic. Maryland over Colorado State. Texas Tech over Drake. And St. John's over Kansas. Duke over Mississippi State. Let's see. Oregon over Arizona. Wisconsin over BYU. I've got Vandy over Alabama. I like how Vanderbilt's played this year. They've pulled off some upsets, and that's a conference matchup. Houston over Gonzaga. I like Gonzaga, but not that much. Clemson over Purdue. Illinois over Kentucky. And Tennessee over Utah State.
All right. Moving on to the Sweet 16, I got Auburn over A&M. I have Michigan State over Ole Miss. Florida over Maryland. St. John's get it done against Texas Tech, which I think will be one of the better matchups in this tournament if that happens that way. I have Duke over Oregon. I have Bama over Wisconsin, Houston over Clemson, and Tennessee over Kentucky.
All righty. I've got Louisville over UC San Diego, Michigan State over Ole Miss, Florida over Maryland, Texas Tech over St. John's, Duke over Oregon, Wisconsin over Vanderbilt, Houston over Clemson, and Tennessee over Illinois into my Elite Eight. And then just to move on, since we've been going at this for a little while, I've got Michigan State into the Final Four over Louisville. Again, not betting against Izzo. Florida, I think, is playing the best basketball of any team in the country right now, so I've got them over Texas Tech. Duke over Wisconsin. If Cooper Flagg's healthy, Duke is going to be a darn near impossible team to stop at points. And then I've got Houston over Tennessee.
A lot of similar picks there. Getting it to the Final Four, I guess it is. So I have Michigan State beating Auburn. I think that's when Auburn gets knocked out. I have Florida over St. John's. I have Duke beating Bama. And then I have Houston over Tennessee as well, getting it to the Final Four. I have Florida knocking off Michigan State in the Final Four, and then I have Houston knocking off Duke in the Final Four.
All righty. Well, similar again, but not quite. Florida over Michigan State for me as well. I've got Duke over Houston. That's going to be a really good defensive battle, though.
Mm-hmm. And then for the championship, I have Florida beating Houston.
I have Florida beating Duke.
Okay, so
we came to the same conclusion.
So a lot more variety in the women's bracket than the men's. As far as there definitely though, as far as the men's, the first couple of rounds, you had a lot more different picks than I did, but the end result was very similar. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Big Sky Now Basketball Podcast. Please hit that link, join us. You'll be able to see our full list of picks both on the women's and men's side, and you can compete against us, and feel free to let us know how your picks are looking. Comment under our YouTube pages, our social medias, or wherever you get our the podcast from.
Thursday at 10 a.m. is the deadline. That's when the games start on Thursday, so you got to get it in before that round of 64 starts. Mm-hmm. Women's is a day later, so you got until Friday.
All right, perfect. Yeah, that's going to wrap things up. We'll have our full brackets posted for you online, so be sure to check that out. March Madness is here, folks. It's going to be a very fun time, so please do join us. Thank you, John, for being my co-host as always. We'll see you all next week on another episode of the Big Sky Now podcast. Thanks to Corwin Motors for sponsoring the Keeping Score podcast. At Corwin Motors, they're proud to be family-driven for over 100 years. Their commitment goes beyond selling cars. They're dedicated to serving our community and providing you with the highest quality vehicles to fit your lifestyle. Whether you're searching for reliability, style, or comfort, they got you covered. They understand that you rely on their website for accurate and up-to-date information, and it's their promise to deliver relevant, detailed content that meets your needs. So if you're in the market for a new Chevrolet or just want to learn more, visit CorwinMotorsKalispell.com.